Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Ghostbusters Afterlife. So, I wanna kind of put a kind of a thing to let everybody know like how much Ghostbuster knowledge I know, so that way when we go into this movie, like I can help people on like I've seen Ghostbusters 1 and 2 hundreds of times. I've seen the 2016 Ghostbusters a whole, I think, once, maybe twice. No, I probably once. And that was like way after like it was convenient for me to see it somewhere on some streaming service somewhere, and I just saw it then cuz it was easy. Um so now, going into Ghostbusters Afterlife, how did I feel about this movie? Well, I feel like this movie is just trying to reach a brand new audience. Basically, they're just recreating the very first film in this movie. This movie is actually heavily predictable, which is kind of a weird thing to say. If you're a hardcore Ghostbusters fan, like this movie is to be like so predictable, it's scary to the point where I'm just like, yep, knew that, yep, check, 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 yeah, like we have like a buildup of a movie that has to like tease us and has to kind of do this slow build of a thing, like we have to re-earn all this stuff, and we also have to have a point in time where they have to re-explain things as if we have never seen the original Ghostbusters movie, which we should have before seeing this film. Um, if anybody was to even watch like the video game or play the video game, or because they've not only done it once before, but then they remastered it to just give other people a chance to go and play that game. So hey, but we don't need any. We just need everything explained to us because they're reaching a new audience here. And plus, hey, like those old guys from the '80s, like yeah, like let's just continue to just show clips of them and YouTube videos and whatever. And but like because we have to slow build things in this film. We have the Ghostbusters like songs, just the that's like slathered throughout this whole entire film. Basically, that song that you have basically heard numerous times through the Ghostbusters video game, expect that here. Expect that in this movie. Expect that to be slathered upon this film because they couldn't come up with any other kind of music, right, for this film? Because this movie at some points feels cheap. If the movie doesn't already feel cheap, then we have like the Walmart spot also in this film, which is like I can say that because it's already been a clip somewhere. I don't even know. I don't even understand why Paul Rudd is even in this film, as well as a number of other characters, because nobody really has a personality in this film. The guy who is to be this one kid called Podcast, he is to only be a relevant character by his own name. The guy who's to be Finn Wolfhard, who is to be Trevor in this movie, like no personality. He's just whatever. He's just a flipping burgers kid, and that's about it. Phoebe, it doesn't matter because no one has a personality in this film. The girl who's to be the descendant from Egon Spangler, and let it be known that you're going to be hearing that several times over in this film, because they have no real legitimate lines in this movie. Or where is the writing? It doesn't matter, right? It's just another Ghostbusters film. That's true. So, severely predictable movie. I'll admit, when this movie actually does finally start showing some strides of going into some Ghostbuster stuff. I think the movie does pick up a little bit. Uh, there might have been a better movie somewhere hidden in the drawing board of this movie. Well, hey, like this movie can seem to have potential of possibly doing a better sequel movie, but this just is what it is. It's kind of a movie that is just to seem mimicking wise like its very original source material, like the very first original Ghostbusters. It copies and pastes like a motherfucker, and so yeah, I think that's all that. It's all that I really want to say for probably the cryptic like sense here. It's just it's Ghostbusters, the original, again, and, and it's heavily to be expected. There are some times when we are to use Shandor a lot more in this movie compared to the very original. Of course, people. Let me pause here for a second. Okay, we're back. Just kind of be like prepared for them to also just kind of like recycle a lot of things from the original film. If you, of course, if it are a hardcore fan of this film, you can get kind of reference or Easter eggs or whatever, because that's their master plan is to just to Easter egg you in this film. Um, so with that said, I think I'm gonna go out of my way to just go into just let's go into spoilers about this movie. So let's go and crack out the otherwise double five time territory. Let's just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time you do spoil this movie. Um, so like this is just a newer movie. So sure it is. So very beginning of the film, we of course now that this is spoilers, go into I guess theaters or wait till it conveniently comes out to probably rent on a Vudu or probably Premium Access or some kind of something somewhere. Probably would be the convenient thing for you just to be able to see this whenever, right? So, uh, the very beginning of this film, we have Egon, who is to be going off to the Shandor mining company cave thing, and I guess there had been a outburst of demons, monsters, or something coming out of this weird, goofy like well that from time to time is to spout out these monsters. So Egon is to go and run off because I guess he had gotten uh, seemingly the inability of using a ghost trap because evidently ghost traps now have to heavily rely on electricity in this movie, which is to have these ghost traps being much more difficult to use compared to any other thing that has ever been done before. Man, like I can't wait for hey guys, let's go and let's bust this ghost. But wait, like we need to go and just plug this ghost trap into some outlet somewhere so we can actually trap this ghost today. So Egon is to go on and is to try to, of course, uh, have this house set up that Egon is to concoct to try and trap this Terra dog, but it seems that this equipment of Egon's is to malfunction, or some person who is to seemingly be a older man. Was he Egon? Could we guarantee that? Well, Shadows would probably tell you no. So Egon goes back into his house and is to just kind of wait for this terror dog to turn him into Dana Barrett, and is to go and thrust through his chair like the terror dog had done to Dana Barrett. And so uh, it seemed that Egon is to adjust his PKE meter to go on and uh, either give himself a heart attack of sorts, or is to just kind of taser this ghost to go away, and Egon is to have a heart attack regardless. So that was a moment in the movie that starts out, and I'm just like, okay, like, whatever was that? Sure. So cue us now transitioning to cover Phoebe or Phoebe. Does it matter? No. Uh, Trevor and Callie, who are to be at this apartment. And I'm going to talk like I have to kind of question things for whatever goofy reason. So we have Phoebe, who is to try and best be able to use their electricity, or figure out how to customize their electricity intake so she can start to use certain devices and so on and so forth. And so it seems that at one point Phoebe is to knock out the power, and so they're like, okay, well, we're getting out of here anyways, because it seems that the super, or the guy that is to be the guy who rents out these rooms, or this apartment that these guys are to be living in, is to evict them. And so I'm like, wow, like, this seems convenient for Harold Ramis's character to now die. Plus, later on in the movie, we have the weird, like, really off-putting line where Ray is to mention that Egon can go rot in hell. That was really just like, wow, to me. And I was like, okay, like, sure. Anyways, so conveniently, it seems that Callie is to find out that her father is to have died, and so now we don't even know who Trevor or Phoebe's father is, because I guess it doesn't really matter. There isn't a picture of him somewhere. We don't actually find out who he is. But so I guess we're just focused on Callie and the Egon situation. So Callie is to find out that her father is dead, and so Callie is to tell this super, or this apartment manager, hey, like, I'll come back within X amount of days, within a week, and I'll get you the rent for this apartment. Like, I just found out that my dad had just died, so we're gonna go off to go and see him. So the guy is like, well, that's great, because you're gonna be evicted, like, basically as soon as you like, as soon as you leave here, I'm changing the locks, so you might as well just leave. So Callie, Trevor, and Phoebe are to go to head where, of course, Egon's, like, home slash barn slash Batcave is, because technically he has one. And so he's basically Bruce Wayne without the money, and I guess with just really just the intelligence. So so we go on, and we have, of course, the opening of them making it to Egon's place is to showcase the Book of Revelations Judgment Day quote that Ray is to give Winston in the very first Ghostbusters movie, where, of course, Ray is to rattle off, as the seas boil and the skies gray, Judgment Day, and blah blah blah. I think I've probably done that somewhere better. If you probably go possibly into the Ghostbusters review, maybe I say that better. But we have signs that say this is how the world ends, and I guess Egon was to have ran off to come to this place to try and keep Gozer at bay because he had found a Gozer adjacent location, because evidently Ego Shandor went off and created Gozer Part 2 in this mining place, this mine, and so Egon is to now have to have ran off to go to live at this place to ward off Gozer Part 2. Or maybe a slightly variationally different Gozer, because this Gozer doesn't look the exact same as the other one, but it doesn't matter. Anyways, it just needs to just be a thing. So, Trevor and Phoebe and Callie are to go to this this place, and so we immediately have at points in time where they're just to kind of mention how, like, Egon was a weird guy, and it seems that whenever they are to go throughout this town, nobody really knows who he is, or if they do know who Egon is, like, they end up telling weird stories about, like, one guy is to mention, like, one hardware store guy is to mention that Egon used to buy weird stuff, and a lot of people just said, like, he was a weird guy, and that's all they can say throughout this town. Evidently, Egon did nothing good but just be this weird guy that no one liked. So, once these characters settle in, because they're going to forcibly have to, all of a sudden there is to be this earthquake that is to happen. And so all of a sudden, Trevor, Callie, and Phoebe are to hide behind this table and just be like, hey, remember that one summer that we all died? And plus also, they're at this, like, Somerville, like, in Oklahoma, supposedly. And so here is where Janine rolls in and is to basically just say that, like, well, hey, like, I was a friend of your grandfather, and guess what? Like, Egon didn't have anything left but debts. Like, that's all that really Janine is here for. There's not a reminiscing moment. There's not a, like, we don't find out that Egon and Janine fell in love and, like, we're seeing grandmother here or grandma here. No. We just have Janine come in here, Janine Melnitz come in here and just say that, like, she was the money person whenever there was actually to be money coming in. And so immediately Callie's like, well, so, like, I guess my dad, like, didn't leave me anything. And so Janine is like, well, he left you this and debt. That's all he really left you. And then so Janine just kind of just walks off after that. Like, she's gone for the rest of the movie. Like, wow, that was a useful character. But, so we push on, and so it seems that Phoebe is to learn that, I guess, her grandfather is still a ghost, because he is to try and beat her in chess, and then uh, Phoebe is to eventually find the PKE meter and is to go through the house and is to stumble upon their basement that is to go on and have this equipment that they are to slowly but surely use in this film. But we have some other things that we have to get to. So the whole family, Trevor, Phoebe, and Callie, all go out to this old-fashioned, like kind of roller skates, like bringing out food to somebody in roller skates, kind of old-fashioned restaurant, diner, something or other. And so we find that there is to be this girl named Lucky that it seems that Trevor is to possibly relationship question mark. It seems that Trevor is to at some point like try to maybe put the moves on Lucky, but like it's not working out. Plus Lucky's also mentioned that she has a boyfriend that had given her this hoodie, and so Trevor's like, no, I'm not wearing this hoodie. Because Trevor is to go and fill out a resume for this Spinner's Diner, and so Lucky's to mention, yeah, you don't have really much on this resume, because for experience, he just said that he was that he had some like goofy thing that doesn't even make sense for actual experience. So, but they end up giving him weirdly this job anyways. So Trevor is to go on and flip burgers, and we have to be excited about this for some reason. Like he's going and cleaning this, like he's doing grunt work. He's going and cleaning this freezer of stuff. I'm like, wow, this is just exciting. And then afterwards, we have Phoebe who is to go into summer school. So they couldn't have hired actual people to put together an actual thing called school. They had to come up with a summer school equivalent for this movie to just make it seem like there's like that's the reason why there's very much a scarce school here for whatever reason. So Phoebe is to go into this class, and so we have Callie who is to meet up with Paul Rudd's character, who is Gruberson. Like, they end up just calling him conveniently Gary in this film. And I would just probably rather just call him Gary for the rest of this film, because why call him Gruberson at all? And so Callie meets Gary, and so Gary is to mention, like, yeah, like, these kids probably aren't all that smart in this school, and so I can kind of make them do whatever I want. And so Callie is like, oh, that's great. It's good for you. So Gary is to be teaching this class, and so all he does is just to pop in old movies. He at first pops in Cujo, which is to basically preemptively tell us where this movie's going. And then we have Child's Play being put on after that. I'm like, so are we going to be Ghostbusting anytime soon? Couldn't we have put in the first Ghostbusters movie in somewhere? Because technically we have to wait for YouTube videos. So what happens is that Phoebe is to go and talk to Gary and seemingly be as smart or maybe even smarter than Gary is. And so we find out that Gary is to be a seismologist, and then science words just start popping out. Anything that Paul Rudd is to deliver in this film, as far as just line delivery whatsoever. Like, he's just there. You would think an experienced actor being put into a film would be like, man, this is the best. Like, him being in this film is the best thing. But actually, it's just as stale as everything else. So Phoebe and Gary are science word stuff, talking about volcano size things, and I'm just utterly, I could care less about this because where does it go with the plot? Where does it go with what matters? But Gary is to mention that there is to, of course, be a ton of earthquakes that is happening onto this town, to a town which should not be having earthquakes. And so Gary's trying to figure this out and figure out why this is going on because it doesn't make sense. And so, like, that leads to a whole bub kiss nothing. And so, next session upon summer class, Phoebe is to bring in a ghost trap. And so, Phoebe is to meet up with Podcast in this very first class. And so it seems like they are going to instantly be best friends. Podcast is to only be called Podcast because he has one, and that's really creative. Evidently, this kid is to have a podcast, and supposedly his 46th video is where he really finds the voice in this podcast. And I'm just like, they have to say that same line not only once, but then twice. Really creative with the just story here. Just recycle lines somewhere in the film. That's like, tells you really got something going here. So yeah, just a whole lot of lines in this movie, so much that you have to recycle the same ones from earlier parts of the film. All right, great. So Phoebe and Podcast go and become instant best friends, and so when Phoebe is to bring in this ghost trap, Podcast is trying to open it up, and Gary's just like, oh my god, like, nice replica. And they're like, replica of what? And he's like, you don't know what this is? And they're like, no, because we didn't watch the other Ghostbusters films, because we're new to this, because we didn't think we had to know anything about pre-other Ghostbusters, but we just knew this one, right? So Gary is like, well, great, I can go and show you YouTube videos of Ghostbusters, and how in the 80s they went through a hotel and just blasted through all that because it was fun. And so it seems that Gary is to go out of his way to figure out how to open up this ghost trap. And so they have to use some bus and some, like, jumper cables to open up this ghost trap. And so when they finally do open up said ghost trap, we find out that there is a terror dog inside of it. So I'm assuming that we weirdly had Egon, who was to have figured out a way to figure out how to trap the terror dog into this trap and then hide the trap, so that way, I guess someone would have found it, right? Because someone had to re-stumble upon that. Like, if Egon is actually to have been a ghost in this film, shouldn't he have spelt this out that, like, hey, don't reopen this trap up? Because it seems when Phoebe is to go into this bat cave of Egon's, he is to just kind of tell her where everything is to use to help put together proton packs and stuff like that. So you would think that he could have easily been able to tell her, hey, don't open the terror dog trap, but you're going to do that anyways. because Walmart. So, Ghost Trap is open. Pterodog comes flying out of it. I guess that could be like I think there might be some jump scares maybe in this movie. Maybe. Ballparkingly. So Pterodog jumps out. Like, a bulk of this movie is like stuff that we'd already seen in all of the trailers. So basically, the trailers give you the whole entire film. So what is the point of this? So they gave you the whole film in one fell swoop because they had so much time to wait, because there was a year and change that this movie had to wait to come out. So so Pterodog comes out of Ghost Trap, and so they're not going to go and like chase after it or anything. And so we at some point have it's set up here that I'm trying to think what Gary ends up taking the kids off to go and drive them back to Callie's home, where it seems that both Callie and Greg are going to mix it up and are going to go on some dates. So we're kind of pre-setting that up, that there's going to be another Pterodog in our future somewhere or another. So eventually, somewhere in this film, Trevor is to go off with Lucky with a bunch of people to go to where the mine is, and there is to be something that is to come out of that mine, which I'm assuming is the other Pterodog, because both Podcast and Phoebe are to go into that mine to stumble upon the Pterodog Gozer like statues, and so they see these things and they're like, oh my god, this is like whatever this is. And so they end up doing some research on it, finding that it's Ego Shandor's thing, and they have to retie that into Ego Shandor, the architect of the hotel from the original film. It is kind of funny because once that ghost, the Pterodog, comes out of the trap, we have Podcast who's to mention to Phoebe that, hey, you're a Ghostbuster. What did she do there? So what happens is Phoebe is to go on and find a proton pack. She is to fix it, all while the help of the spirit of Egon. And so now that Phoebe has this proton pack, she is to go off to some part of this barn, I'm assuming? Sure. And is to test this proton pack. And supposedly she had done technically surprisingly well for her first attempt at a proton pack, because I've had several times where a lot of people use a proton pack and then fall on their butts, or I've seen that several times through other things. So surprisingly, Phoebe does well, even though the targets, she pretty much missed every single one of them, and she basically destroyed everything around that target. So she hasn't probably achieved master throw skill, as probably Bray is to have probably said in the video game, but she'll get there. So now all of a sudden, surprisingly, Trevor is to make his way back home, and is after one of his days at work, and so he ends up finding the Ecto-1 and is trying to decide to just think if he can fix it, or something like that, but really Egon is to really put the finishing touches into making the Ecto-1 work again. And so Trevor is to drive off with the Ecto-1 just into this field somewhere, just kind of having fun. And so all of a sudden Phoebe is to, while she's blasting this proton pack, all of a sudden is to hear a noise coming from some part of this barn. And so both of these characters are to stumble upon this ghost called Muncher, which is basically the Slimer equivalent in this film. They kind of prepare it as if this is to be a Slimer equivalent. We don't have the Cedric Hotel like in the original Ghostbusters to have this character be useful. He is just to be in some part of this barn where he's just munching away on several metal items. But this character comes into play later on when they actually need him for something. So Phoebe is to go and turn on this proton pack and get the wand ready. And so she, of course, is to try and blast this ghost. We have Podcast, who's to very much be like the Ray Eschlight character, having the Ecto goggles on, and is to have a weird, like, Polaroid come out of his head for whatever goofy reason. I don't know if that was always to have been a plan for them to do that, or they did it now. So just creating like some kind of merchandise really is all that really matters in this film, with on top of trying to create a movie that people can just be like, it's a thing, okay, all right. So it's the first film, really, it is, so it feels like it. So Phoebe is to try to go and get this ghost, but it seems that there's still a problem with this thing called a trap. So we now have Phoebe trying to get this muncher, and then all of a sudden Trevor is to wind up mixing himself up with both Phoebe and Podcast. And so now, like, Phoebe and Podcast are getting into the Ecto-1 and saying, like, hey, punch it, we need to go and find this muncher ghost, who is to decidingly go into town and start munching on a fire hydrant, and then mixes his way into the Spinner's Diner. So Phoebe is to proton pack her way through town and blast up a lot of things, which is, like, for Ghostbusters, that's like a go-to thing. And so while that's going on, both Callie and Greg, or Gary, are, it does matter, it's Paul Rudd, are having this date. And so Gary is to have reasonably just, like, mentioned that, like, science, it's wonderful, and, like, they're making small talk, which is just, like, Gary is to mention about Callie's father, and, like, does she remember much about him? And Callie's like, no, not really. But we find later that Callie's to see, like, millions upon millions of photos of her in Egon's little bat cave, and then she's like, oh, he did care. Barely. He did have a heart. Through pictures. Alright, great. Maybe that was just his thing. Anyways, so Gary and Callie are having this dinner. And so they, I think, are to eventually see the Muncher ghost kind of go through this place and like, hey, what was that? But so Phoebe is desperately trying going through town to blast this ghost, and we have this weird motorized ghost trap that is to seemingly go faster than the Ecto-1 itself. absurdly fast, to where like this ghost trap can basically just, if it's in a race with Ecto 1 is definitely going to lose, which that makes so much sense, right? I have to justify that to myself. So this ghost trap is to make its way to the Muncher ghost, and so uh, Phoebe is to try and consistently shoot this thing via this Ecto One door that is to now push out to be this uh, like gunner spot for them to have this cool and unique toy that eventually someone will like somewhere. So Phoebe is to go and blast this thing, and so uh, Trevor is to mention they're getting close to this bridge to make it to this mining place because that's where this ghost was trying to head. So it's either now or never. And so coincidentally, Phoebe is to blast the ghost. Podcast is to open up the trap, capturing the ghost. Woohoo! And Phoebe conveniently goes into the Ecto One before the bridge is to basically destroy this car. With the door, being ajar. So they go on and like, okay, why did the Muncher ghost want to head back to this mine? And so they head further in there to seemingly find the body of Ivo Shandor. Because if he was supposedly dead in the game, he's kind of preserved in this movie. And he is to, of course, be J.K. Simmons. The guy from the Spider-Man movies. The J. Jonah Jameson, like that guy. And he was in Whiplash and a number of other things. So I'm just like, okay, this could be something interesting where we have like Shenandoah like kind of being used well in this story. But then I would just be thinking of something creative to do, right? So we find out that Egon had been keeping an eye on this cave and preventing anything from coming out of it, and that proton packs were to be set up as like turrets when any ghost was to try to get out of this ghost-like well. And so the earthquakes were all to be caused from these ghosts trying to escape, the proton packs blasting these ghosts back into this well to keep them there, to keep them bottled in there. And so now they figured out where all the earthquakes are coming from. So when the Ecto One was to come back into town, we have Sheriff Domingo, who is to have arrested these guys. I'm like, oh, okay, like it's not a Ghostbusters movie if the Ghostbusters don't go to jail. Because we're still mimicking the first film. So Phoebe was to once before watch a video of the original Ghostbusters going on and doing their old commercial where they're ready to believe you, and there's to be a phone number listed, and so yeah, like there's a whole rigmarole of us seeing this old commercial and now having to reuse it in this spot now. So Phoebe is to, of course, get one phone call, and the one phone call that she makes is to Ray. So I'm like, please don't tell me that this is going to be the only spot that this character is going to be in, because I swear to God, if it is, I am going to be furious, but luckily it's not. So Ray is to go and talk to Phoebe, and so Phoebe is to mention that, like, hey, like, I know Egon Spangler, and you and him used to be good friends. And Ray is just like, well, like, Egon can go and rot in hell. And so Phoebe's like, well, Egon's dead. And so Ray's like, poor choice of words, kind of thing. So he has to kind of like rebuttal or kind of pull back. And so Ray is to tell Phoebe that Egon, I guess, had run off of the business because Venkman was to say that maybe they had busted ghosts far too well, and so supposedly Ray had ran off to be some, or Peter had run off to be some professor at some school somewhere uh, to go and do some kind of marketing teaching thing. Zedmore evidently had gotten to be some kind of rich guy to the point of him going and financing a lot of the other Ghostbusters things at some point, even Ray's occult, who I guess was to be closed when uh, when Phoebe was to call Ray at Ray's occult. So they at least kept something from Ghostbusters 2 to reattach itself onto Ghostbusters 3, but it's probably a whole brand spanking new Ray's occult building that was just to be shifted off to somewhere. But yeah, so Ray was to also mention that supposedly the old firehouse was to be bought out by some actor guy and is now some Starbucks. And I'm like, really? Because end credit scene will probably tell you different, but still. That Winston went on and rebought the firehouse and is to still have the containment unit there weirdly, and like we'll tell you that that's kind of all to just set up for another Ghostbusters film. So yeah, so Ray isn't like seemingly with the way this kind of ends to be really just interested in becoming a Ghostbuster again. So Sheriff Domingo is to hang up with Phoebe after kind of them like kind of rehashing things, and but also Ray was to mention that Egon was to run off with all their equipment and kind of shortchanged all of them, and said that he was to go and try to prevent the end of the world at this one barn farm house place. So Sheriff Domingo hung up the phone, and so now the kids are to be arrested. Callie and Gary are to find out that the kids are to get arrested, and so they bail them out. We have it where Sheriff Domingo was to keep all of their equipment, and so Phoebe is to try to turn on the proton pack to blast this sheriff. And I'm like, really? You're gonna go and blast this sheriff? But like, they have her like kind of do away with that. So after this moment, so everybody's to make their way back home. Gary is to go and get some ice cream at a Walmart, where he is to mix his way up with some Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and a Terror Dog. And so Gary is to be running out of this Walmart, and so there is a Terror Dog that is to attack his car and then forcibly just turn Gary into Keymaster, or gatekeeper, whichever, because the Terror Dogs are, I guess, much more interchangeable now, but whatever. So I'm assuming he's possibly like the Keymaster because that was the male role, right? So now we go on and we have to figure out who's going to be the other Terror Dog, which is going to be so like it's a mystery. There's a real mystery to be solved here. Who's going to be the like if they didn't set anything up? So, anyways, pushing on. So what eventually ends up playing out is that uh, if we find out that Gary's to be the other Terror Dog. So I'm trying to figure out how to wiggle my way out of this spot here that I created for myself. So, and I'm trying to figure out how to like transition back through this film. So now the other Terror Dog that Trevor was to see come out of this mine was to mention that there was a voice that said Gozer instead of Zool or anything like that. So, sure. Uh, that was the thing that came out of the mine, and that was the other Terror Dog that said Gozer. And so Trevor, when they were in prison, had to tell us that, and also had to go with the whole Ego Shandor thing and talked about the architect and so on and so forth, and bringing it all back. So, pushing us on to Callie is to be the other Terror Dog. She ends up getting taken, and so now we are to basically recreate the whole Gozer thing all over again. And because Callie is to go on to sit in this chair, and Trevor and Phoebe and everybody is to go back to re-meet up with Callie, and she is to like, there is no Callie, there's only Zool kind of thing. And we're like, oh, okay, great. It's recycling all over again. So Trevor, Phoebe, Lucky, all these podcasts, all these people have to go and break out all of this Ghostbusters equipment from the sheriff's department to now try to get all the stuff that they can get, all these ghost traps and all of everything, to fight against Gozer and the Terror Dogs, because they're coming. So they're having trouble going and getting the proton pack and the ghost trap from the sheriff's office. And so Podcast comes up with the idea of opening the Muncher ghost trap to have Muncher chew through his way of the metal that is to be placed in front of him. And that opens up the proton pack and ghost trap so they can grab all those. And so they push on to not really have like a lot of proton packs in this movie, which doesn't really make sense, but you couldn't have figured out how to make more? Or since Phoebe can like just easily make stuff, you would have thought she would have come up with a number of proton packs, but whatever. And so Phoebe is to go on and is to, of course, Phoebe and everyone is to go on and like go and put on their jumpsuits and have their own little names being put on. Podcast, Lucky, Trevor, like get the whole onesies on and go out and try to bust these ghosts. And so both the Terror Dogs are to be set up onto the structure And so Gozer is to reappear slightly without red eyes and with different colored flat top. But this is a new imagining of this character. So while that's going on, we have Ego Shandor, who is to appear and is to tell Gozer, it's like, hey, like I'm back and like I'm here to serve you. Yeah, like Gozer just rips Shandor in half and kills him. And I'm like, wow, that was such a waste of this character. Thank God we used him here because, man, if I could only just have had him in just 5 more seconds of this film for whatever reason. So now we have the spot where we're to kind of set up the, like, are you a god kind of thing. Well, we kind of set that up technically twice here. But so the guys are to go on and are to realize that they don't have the well set up equipment to go after this Gozer. They need to actually go by where Egon's home is, because that'll be a much better setup with electricity and whatever. Even though it failed in the beginning of this film, it's going to work now, weirdly. And so now the guys go on to run off to kind of home base to try and square off now with Gozer. Here's the thing, though. The rest of the Ghostbusters are to finally arrive within the last 10 minutes of this film and to help Phoebe bust these ghosts. And so, and that's the only real important part to the end of this movie. So, and plus also, let's kind of wrap this bad boy up. So, Bill Murray is to possibly have some kind of fun lines here, and Ray is to kind of give some lines that feel familiar to the other movie, the original film, where like they go into like the Count and State of New York, and so Ray has a whole lineup of stuff that he has to now say now instead of the Count and State of New York and whatever, to go and have them bust this Gozer here because they're kind of out of their territory. So we now have it where there's a spot where they conveniently have a trap that is to trap one of the Terra dogs. And so now Callie is to be out of one of the Terra dogs. And so Gozer had weakened. And so so Phoebe was technically fighting a weaker Gozer because there's one Terra dog that is still to be left. So all of a sudden, we go and reopen that trap because Gozer is to rip open that trap to have the other Terra dog go into Lucky instead, the girl Lucky. And so Trevor is going on and having some problems as well as podcasts because they're dealing with all these mini Stay Puft Marshmallow Men that end up coming into the Ecto-1 and are trying to cause them problems. Because when Paul Rudd was to go into the Walmart, the first thing that he was to see after he got this ice cream was that he was kind of thumbing through this aisle, I guess, to create some s'mores, because these Stay Puft Marshmallow Men, as soon as they appear to Paul Rudd and bite his finger, they weirdly just want to make s'mores of themselves and then go into blenders and, I guess, do any number of things that a normal Stay Puft Marshmallow would do. And then Paul Rudd runs off because he's scared of Stay Puft Marshmallow Men and then he finds a terror dog going and munching on some dog food. And then, of course, Gary is to run off from that and is to get caught by the terror dog. So now let's go to the crossing the streams spot. So now that Gozer is to be fully formed with these terror dogs, so the Ghostbusters are to decide to go and cross the streams yet again with just the three of them. And so Phoebe is to go on and is to join them with Egon helping her steady the stream. And so now the other original Ghostbusters are looking on as Egon being there as a ghost. Hilariously, there was some Ghostbusters script where supposedly Peter was supposed to be some ghost. Well, I guess now we had Harold Ramis as a ghost, aka Egon in this film, which is kind of a weird full circle kind of thing, which I guess they technically used certain parts of other Ghostbusters scripts to probably create this one because so much effort was put into this film, I'm sure. So they cross the streams to take down Gozer and the Terror Dogs, and so we wind up just like trapping all of these characters, and so now the Ghostbusters are kind of just like, oh my god, like Egon, you're here, and like they're kind of like, hey man, you should have called, and like, and all kinds of things. They're just kind of like, they're just kind of catching up a little bit, and Egon doesn't have a line to say in this movie because of course he doesn't, because that's nice that they didn't even try to like use any kind of footage or any kind of stuff that he said in some video game somewhere, or just kind of reused his voice at some point. No, he says nothing, and I'm okay with that. So really what all just happens is like Egon is to say his final goodbyes. He is to hug Phoebe. He is to hug Callie. And then I guess he goes off to heaven, I'm assuming. Job well done, I guess. Well, I guess that was... Could we call that it? That, like, Egon is now done? Like, I don't have this feeling that they're going to bring him back. That would just seem really weird. They didn't bring back Slimer, though. We don't see Slimer in this movie. I guess Muncher is a good enough Slimer equivalent. But I was just expecting for them to have some kind of Slimer closure moment, which they really don't here, which I just thought was weird. So... And really, that just kind of finishes up the movie with them having to un-Terradog the Terradogs. They're basically just in, like, statues again, where kind of how the first Ghostbusters finish off, where Sigourney Weaver is telling Bill Murray, hi, and that's basically what Paul Rudd tells Callie's character when she like helps him like get out of this weird goofy terror dog like thing. And so Trevor is to rescue Lucky from her thing, and so there's just a lot of confusion had by these characters. And so all of a sudden we have now podcasts coming out of the Ecto-1 looking like Winston Zeddemore from the end of Ghostbusters, the first one. And so now Dan Aykroyd is to appear to see podcast and is to go and mention, it's like, well, hey, like, Simblisto Blast of 1908 or whatever. Like, hey, like, you were involved in a real big event here, kid. Like, what's your name? And it's like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm podcast. Like, well, why? It's like, well, yeah, because I have a podcast. It's like, oh, what's your handle? Like, what's the podcast name? And so podcast is to rattle off this name, and he's like, oh, you're that guy? And so podcast is like, you're my subscriber? And he's like, yeah, it really picked up after 60 whatever thing, like really just found its voice. And so we really reused that line. So I'm just kind of half efforting this one. Just wasn't a good movie. It just wasn't. It was so disappointing. It was so just like, man, can we just get a good Ghostbusters movie? Like all that like I really ever hope for is just a real just Ghostbusters movie that it could just be like not heavily predictable Ghostbusters movie. I was waiting to just be so uh like I felt like I wanted to be so proven so wildly wrong, and I wasn't. Like, and a lot of people are gonna have this like, hey man, I'm gonna love to just bash through this movie. It's gonna be fun. Um so and plus there's also other people that are going and doing these like joke reviews saying like, yeah, I'm not gonna review this movie because I know it's gonna be bad. I didn't even want to see this movie, but I'm going to watch it in actual theaters on Tuesday. So I'm like, well, I'm going to review this anyways. Like, I might as well because I'll either watch it or whatever. So, um, yeah. So I was either going to watch this either way because I was just like, maybe this is going to be a good enough movie. I hope. But it wasn't. Anyways, so uh, really we have end credit scenes that we really just have to carry on about because what else is really going on here besides there seemingly being a possible relationship between Gary and Callie at the end of this. So end credits are just to show both uh, Dana Barrett and Bill Murray playing like cards, like seemingly from back from the original opening of the Ghostbusters film. And so we find out that I guess Peter is to cheat and had put some kind of marker on some of the cards so that way he can tell what exactly all the cards are. So Peter was cheating. And so there is absolutely no Oscar in an end credit scene, which tells you I guess they really just didn't care about the second film, I guess, because there's no slime reference here, there's no nothing. But that is just to probably be like, well, hey, we got to do something in the sequel, so we're gonna just use like probably Vigo the Carpathian in the sequel. We're gonna rehash that back out because comic books have technically been doing that. So they might just steal a lot of stuff from the comic books to do movie two. So and then the other scene is to have Winston in the firehouse, and he is to go to the containment unit. The containment unit is glowing red, showcasing to us that we're probably going to have another villain uh, sometime soon that isn't Gozer, and will probably be Vigo the Carpathian. I'm assuming, because whatever heck else are we going to do that has to be different. Who are the Scully brothers going to be in the sequel movie? Are they going to have another courtroom scene in the second film because of what had all happened with the sheriff and them breaking through the? Is somebody going to have to go into court for this sequel? Like, are we going to have more of the Ghostbusters in the sequel movie? Like, I thought it would have been cool if the sheriff, if we would have found out all along that that was some connection to Zeddemore, and that would have actually been cool to have like Sheriff Zeddemore, but we didn't go with that. Um, to have us find out that like Winston had a son, and he coincidentally was in Ohio or Oklahoma or wherever they're going, Somerville, this sheriff. Anyway, so I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna call it a day. So bye everybody. Bye everybody. If there's anything that I forgot about, or if there's anything that I missed about, I think I covered most of this movie. there's a transition there where obviously I just was like, I don't know where I'm going with this, uh, and that's obvious. But everything else, I think I covered. I feel like I may not feel good about the movie, but I feel good that I did this so I can get this out because it's a new release movie, and so I'll probably still see this again in possibly theaters on Tuesday, and maybe I'll feel different about it. Maybe I'll just be like, you know what, like I feel like better seeing it more, or maybe I'll just need after seeing it once, I'll just wait numerous years later. It'll be like a V Vendetta situation where I'm like, hey man, this movie I thought was bad, but actually it's way better with some time settling. Um, Plus, there might be some sequels in store for this movie, so I'm hoping for better sequels than whatever this was. I think this was just to just say, hey, like we're trying, and this is gonna be out, but we're gonna put a better sequel out because I like a sequel has to be better than this film, and so we'll see where we go with that. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.